All right, welcome to 24 production techniques. We're going to talk about some rigging today. I've got a couple videos I'm going to have you watch. Hopefully this will be the first one. We're going to talk about rigging systems, and after that I'll have a whole separate one on how to terminate the ends of wire rope. So wire rope is this stuff right here. This is going to be one of the most commonly used items in the theater. Beyond that, you'll probably see quick links a lot, you'll see shackles a lot, and you will see eye bolts a lot. And then also, potentially, some chain. I've got a few other things I'm going to show you, but we're going to talk about rigging systems as a whole before we go anywhere with this. So the first thing that I want to explain to you guys is that a rigging system is only as good as its weakest link. Just like a chain, that whole saying about chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Same thing with an entire rigging system. What I mean by that is this wire rope is probably not the only thing I'm using to rig something. Clearly, like an eye bolt is not the only thing that I'm using to rig a system, and neither is chain. I have to use all these pieces together, and they all have different load ratings. I need to check all of these load ratings, and whatever the lowest rating is now my new rating for the entire system. Because that is the weakest part, so if that were to break, it doesn't matter if something else can hold 4 times the amount of weight. That first piece is already broken and I've got things falling to the ground. So with that, I've got a couple things I want to talk about. We have a couple different ways we can talk about a load rating. We have a breaking strength and we have working load limit. They're pretty straightforward terms. Breaking strength is the load at which something is going to break. Working load limit, however, is the amount of weight that you can safely put on the system and actually weight it all the way to that limit, and it is still safe to use. Any good rigging component is going to have that put right into the item. So if you look at that guy there, you will see a WLL 1/2 T. Yep. So let's see if this camera will read any of that as well. Not sure, but hopefully we'll get it worked out for you. If not, I'll put some subtitles in or something. But this shackle here has a WLL of 1/2 T. T is for ton. So half of a ton is 1,000 pounds. That is the working load limit of this shackle. This one here is 3/4 of a ton, or 1,500 pounds. So you can see they look very similar, and yet that one has 500 more pounds of working load limit. Working load limit is going to include some sort of safety factor, and that is going to be in a ratio that depends on your industry and what it's doing. So minimum, you're going to see probably a 3-to-1 safety factor, meaning if this guy is rated for 1,000 pounds, it's going to break at 3,000 pounds. A 4-to-1, still this is a 1,000 pound working load limit, so 4-to-1 means this would break at 4,000 pounds. That can go all the way up to like a 10-to-1 safety factor. So if this were rated with a 10-to-1 safety factor, working load limit of 1,000 pounds means that this would break at 10,000 pounds. So you can see that's a pretty impressive difference as far as the weight that this can hold. And that's why it's important to know your working load limit and know some of your safety factors. But typically, if you're staying within that working load limit, the safety factor isn't as important because you'll never reach it. Anything that is good for rigging is going to be forged and stamped with some sort of rating. This is why, even though you'll see a ton of quick links, they should not be used for rigging. Nowhere on here does it tell me what its rating is, any sort of safety factor, where it was made, or any of that. So this might be good for 100 pounds, this might be good for 1,000 pounds, but I don't know, and therefore do not want to use it. I know all of the ratings for the equipment that is now on this table, and that's why it's safe to use all this. Your 1/8 inch wire rope is going to be good for around 700 pounds. And that is the working load limit. So I could put up to 700 pounds on this one cable and be okay. I've also got this shackle here that's good for 1,000 pounds. So I'm going to put that here in the system. For some reason, I want to put this other shackle right here, which is good for 1,500 pounds. So, with these all connected together, I've got something good for 700 pounds, something good for 1,000 pounds, and something good for 1,500 pounds. Even with all these together, my working load limit for this rigging system would be 700 pounds because that is my weakest link. So now I've got my means to attach something to a flat and to fly it, but I still need I have a few different methods on how to attach to a flat or other pieces of equipment that I might want to rig. The most common that you will see is an eye bolt. I've got two different eye bolts here. I've got a forged eye bolt and I've got a bent eye bolt. And I know we've talked about this before, but it's worth talking about again. Is you will never use a bent eye bolt in any sort of rigging system. That's because it is literally just bent around here until it gets back to itself. So, if this were to be overloaded at all, that eye will just uncurl itself and drop off whatever is hanging on it. Lots of bad things that can happen if this is overloaded and things we want to avoid. Instead, we're going to be using a forged eye bolt because, unlike a bent eye bolt, this is all one solid piece all the way around here. So even if this were to be overloaded, the most it will do is deform and elongate out, so it'll look more like an oval than a circle. But that is a good visual warning that I have overloaded a system and I can take that out of service before it has broken down. Beyond eye bolts, there's a few other things that you will see. And that is what we call hanging iron. It is not uncommon to see this attached to the bottom of a flat. Some of them have the bottom bent around to be a nice big U, so you can actually just hook a flat right onto it. Or you just take this, screw that into your flat, and you're good to go. When rigging, you always want to rig from the bottom. You do this because if you remember how a flat is built, the top and bottom rails cap everything. So if I just hang off of the top, I can rip apart that top rail, and then the rest of my flat goes down to the ground. But if I go to the bottom and start to lift on that, then it's compressing everything and it cannot rip apart. So now I've reached the dilemma that if this is at the bottom, what keeps that whole flat from wanting to flip out? That is where we get something like this keeper plate that I can just attach at the top of the flat, and that just keeps this wire up there at the top where I want it but it's not really taking any weight. So you'll see these up at the top of the system. So my next downside to this is I have zero adjustability, which makes it tough to level out a wall or to level out a long wall that has multiple pieces together in the system. So that is where I can come in with a turnbuckle and a bottom plate like this. So by putting this into my system, it's as simple as pinning this in here. So now, if I want this thing longer or shorter, I can just start turning this. And by doing this, I've just made this probably 3 inches longer. Or I can start to wind this in. I'll keep going here for a little bit. So I've just taken about 2 inches out of this system. About 4 inches there. All the way down. So you can see I have a lot of adjustability on this. So that way if I have a wall that's hanging a little crooked, all I have to do is tighten up one of those turnbuckles and it'll even up that bottom and get everything level for me. And that's another rated piece of hardware. I can look it up and tell you exactly how much that's rated for, and then it falls within a good rigging system that not only keeps me safe, but it keeps things easy to adjust so I can level it all out and make sure everything's pulling the same. Let's see what else. Talked about that already. Talked about that, talked about that, talked about that, and talked about that. So I think that covers the majority of what we need to talk about for rigging. Talked about all that. Yep. Alright. I think that will take care of rigging as a whole and those whole systems. Please also watch the video about terminating wire rope. You will see that pop up right after this first one. And that should be all that you need to know about rigging to cover the quiz. Please email me if you guys have any questions. Thank you.